Welcome to Carrickfergus Vineyard, a place of hope where lives are changing. We're a church in the heart of Carrickfergus, passionate about seeing people's lives changed by the love of Jesus. The following message was given at one of our Sunday services.
Good morning. Yes, there's a lot more here than there was at the start. We were joking that there was going to be only the people who were on team going to be here. So, but no, it's really good to see you, and I'm actually surprised there's as many, which is great because it's that perfect triple whammy of it's the summer holidays. Also, the way the 12th's fallen, that people are getting days off before or after the weekend, and the weather's glorious. But you're here, you're the faithful, and your reward will probably be in heaven rather than your reward listening to me. So I just don't want to get your hopes up. I will encourage you a little and say it's short, so we're talking 15 minutes, so don't panic. And my boys are looking at me going, I have to listen to him uninterrupted for 15 minutes. So no heckling, all right, from the middle, please, boys, which is good. And yeah, it's really good to see. It's like, you're welcome. And I was thinking that if you are a guest, you're welcome. But if you're the old faithful, you're welcome here. It's really good. We're playing about over the summer with Heroes of the Faith, talking about those who are significant, people who have got stories in the Bible, and we'll just dip in. I'm on Elijah, and this is going to be whistle stop. So the really hard thing, I remember Paul was saying about Ellie doing the whole of Daniel. I'm like, hold on, that's what we're going to be doing over the summer. We're going to take one person and try to give you a good run through. So I'm not going to go too deep. I'm going to skim the surface. We're going to whistle through. But there's some really interesting things, and I would love us to reflect on them as we do. So we'll give a little bit of space in that because I believe that God speaks, and he doesn't just speak to me, he speaks to you. So I want to give you space of encouragement to be spoken to and to hear. Right, I find it really helpful to place things in context rather than just take a wee verse and read it out and see what's going on. Maybe it's my Bible college training with my lecturers saying, where does this fit in the context? Like, okay. But I find it really helpful. And so I want to do that. And also a phrase I've come across recently is the Bible was not written to you, but it was written for you. And I'm going, what does that mean? The Bible. It was a guy, Wes Huff, who's got a little bit of sort of fame at the minute. He was on Joe Rogan, he was doing different things, but he's not a theologian. He is a theologian, but he's a Bible scholar, and he was using the phrase of the Bible is not written to you, but it's written for you. And what he means is the Bible was written to somebody else. It was written to a specific audience, to a specific people at a specific time, and it was written to them. Like Paul's letters were written to the people in Corinth, right? All that sort of stuff when you're thinking of different things, and all different places. But even though it wasn't written to you, it was written for you. But we have to be a little bit more careful of looking at the context of seeing where that fits and saying, right, rather than just transliterating something from the past and going, that fits me today, we need to look at the context of where that sits. So that's the little warning, and I find that helpful. So give me a little bit to set this in context before we skip on. And so Elijah, Old Testament, we're in 1st and 2nd Kings. So the end of 1st Kings and the start of 2nd Kings, in those books we find Elijah. And it's in the northern kingdom. So let me explain this a little bit. Children of Israel, God's people, were like, we want a king. You're like, you don't really need a king. God, I'm your king. All the other nations have kings. We want a king. Right, okay, we'll give you Saul. Not really that good. God's like, I told you so. Not quite told you so, but you have Saul, and then David comes, and then his son Solomon. So they've had kings. And then at the end of Solomon, on all his wisdom, marrying people from different nations, setting up shrines to all their gods, into this idea of idolatry. So not actually being the king that God would expect them to be leading the nation. So much so that the prophecy was that this kingdom will be taken from your children. So this is where we lead into this split between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Rehoboam was Solomon's son, and the people came to him and said, look, we are getting tortured here. Taxes are high. This is tough. And Rehoboam's like, you think it was tough before? Where do you see me? And he just let it on even thicker. So there was a rebellion. Rehoboam, Jeroboam, the kingdom splits. You've got Judah and Benjamin below and 10 tribes north. That's the kind of divided kingdom. So things were bad, and it lists through another set of kings, and you get to where we find Elijah. So things were bad, and they got worse, is kind of the story. So Rehoboam, Jeroboam, divided kingdom, Elijah turns up, and I want to read a bit. Now, here's the thing. I can't read all this. So it's only a few chapters, but if I spent my 15 minutes, I would just read these, and that would be great. But I'm not sure Paul and Chantel will be happy if I just stood up and read to you. So my encouragement is the little bits I read are just touchstones. Please go and read the bigger bit. It's not long. Yeah, it's pretty easy. Let me read a little bit here on Kings. Did you like that? I was one-handed, flick the Bible up. You know, is it like one of those things with pistols? We were watching The Three Amigos. Is this like the same version of that, only with the Bible? I don't know. Okay, so let's read from 1 Kings 17, and I'll read a couple of verses here. Now, Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will neither be dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. "Leave here, turn eastward, and head to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have ordained the ravens to feed you there." So he did what the Lord told him, and he went to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan, and he stayed there. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. So this is where Elijah appears in the story. And I said things got worse. King Ahab and his wife Jezebel, they were the worst of the worst. So there was rebellion in the kingdom, things divided, it wasn't going great, and it just got worse and worse. This, you're talking awful stuff. This is like child sacrifice, all the sort of worst things you can think of. This was it. And Elijah turns up there as a prophet of fire and zeal, and he says, "You know what? The Lord is going to punish you. There's going to be no rain here. There is going to be a drought." And he speaks against it. And it's interesting when he finds out, speaking against this idolatry, the standing against this evil, worship of Baal, whatever you want to call it. And he's there taking a stand. Here's what I think's interesting today, as we take a little skip through this guy's story. It's not an Old Testament lecture of, right, we're going to test you on this and then and see what you remember. It's where does it apply? And maybe a little touch point as we go along is, as we see stories, little snippets of Elijah, it's worth us to reflect on. So I'm going to give you time to reflect a little bit. As I said, God speaks, and we want to give him a few moments to do that. Let me think of this one. So this is Elijah, who's found himself speaking up against idolatry. He finds himself in a context and speaks out against it. And my thought here is where do you find yourself? What's going on around you in your specific context? Where should you be standing up? Now, I'm not asking you just to be one of the troublemakers who are keyboard warriors or just shouting for the sake of shouting. There's plenty of people giving off in this sort of culture war type thing. It's not what I'm talking about. There's plenty of people doing that. I'm asking you, what's God showing you? Where's God nudging you to stand up? Where can you reflect what the kingdom should be as opposed to what it is? Is it in school? Is it in work? Is it in some of the relationships in your family? Social circles? Where should you be standing up for what you see as not right? Is it in whatever context? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to have a think. And it may not be you may be, oh, no, I'm okay at the minute. Somebody may get a specific place to do something. And my question is what has he given you eyes to see and ears to hear? Where might you get stand up for something? It doesn't have to be Baal worship and going to the king and doing all this. It can be significant in your little context where. Take a few seconds to think of, is there somewhere? Okay. Maybe that's something for you to take away and have a think about. After Elijah prophesies the years of drought, God sends him to hide east of the Jordan. where he is fed by ravens. This is a rather dramatic story, so there's lots of this as go through. We'll get a wee quick snapshot of the things that go on. Go here, and I'll get the birds to come and feed you, and that divine provision is kind of what we're thinking of here. But that's where we stop reading, and again I said we can't just read the whole thing, but as we go on next to that, if he's drinking from the brook and there's a drought, the brook's going to dry up, and it did. At that point, God was saying, right, move on. Here's where I want you to go. And the story is that he went to a widow's house. And he says, any chance of something to eat? And she was saying, look, actually, me and my son, we're making our last bit of bread. And I'm just going to gather some wood to the fire and go and die. Like, this is our last meal. There's nothing. We're really suffering here. And Elijah's like, actually, if you make me something, you won't be starving like that. She says, I've only got one handful of flour and a little oil. But she feeds him. And then that flour maintains and never runs out, and the oil doesn't run out. There's provision for her and Elijah. And miraculous provision again. So we'll have the ravens and the brook, and then we have this provision there. But trouble strikes and the son dies. And she's like, what are you doing? I thought that you were meant to be providing all this stuff. What's God doing? And the story is Elijah goes and prays and lies on him, and the boy comes back to life. There's provision. And here's the thing I'm thinking of here. If you're familiar with the story, great. But my thoughts are around provision, and where has God been really faithful to you? Where has he provided? What do you need to name and notice about God's provision? Because he is doing that, even when you think it's tough. Where do you need to name and notice that provision? And I'll give you a few seconds while I take a drink of how has he provided for you? Has that provision been financial, circumstantial? Have you had family members that have met with Jesus and been changed? Have they come to faith? Have they returned to faith? Have they been miraculous? Like, where has God provided? Where has God blessed you abundantly? But here's the thing. God's blessing on Elijah didn't stop with him. It extended beyond him. So he was blessed. Yep, he was in the position of ravens feeding and doing all this. But the widow, she got to receive, and the son got to receive as well. So my question is, like the widow and the son who were blessed by God's provision, where does his blessing reach through you? Where do you get to pass it on, pay it forward, whatever the movies were saying? Where do you get to do that? Because it's not all just for you. It's not all just for me. Like, I don't get it to keep it and hoard it and say, right, oh, God, you're good. But this isn't just like in God's kingdom, that giving away does not mean that we have less. So where does the provision extend beyond you? Where does the blessing reach from you and out? So I'm going to skip over the next bit. I'm not going to spend time here talking about the big one in the Elijah story where he meets the prophets of Baal and fire from heaven that burns the sacrifices and does all that. He goes to the mountain, head between the legs and prays, and the drought ends. Chantel's covered that. So if that's interest you and you haven't heard it, go back and listen on the podcast stuff. That's there. I'm not going to go through all that. But what I am going to do is see what happens next. So I'm going to read again from Kings. We're in chapter 19. Read a few verses here. And I'm going to read chapter 19, 1 to 15. Now, Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done. And now he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. So Elijah was afraid. And he ran for his life. And when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servants there, while he himself went a day's journey into the desert. He came to a broom tree. He sat down under it and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under a tree and he fell asleep. All at once, an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." And he looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and he drank, and then he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey's too much for you." So he got up, and he ate and he drank. And he was strengthened by the food, and he travelled for 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave, and he spent the night. Again, we talk about provision, but that'll be what we're just thinking on. After all the stuff that happened to him, let me recount this really quickly. After all that he's seen, and Jezebel threatens him, he runs and he wants to die. After he announced the drought, and there was no rain for 3 years. After he was fed miraculously by ravens. After the endless supply of flour and oil. After he raised the widow's son from the dead. After the fire from heaven consumes the sacrifices. After the rain returns after the drought. After he gets in front of Ahab's chariot and runs with super speed and beats a horse and cart all the way there. After all these things, he gets threatened and he goes, "I'm no better than my ancestors. I'm done." And I find this really interesting because when I was at college, I was really privileged to have a girl, one of the lecturers, say a girl woman, Dr. Lena Morrow. She was fantastic, really good. And obviously she knew her Bible and she taught well. Well, I say obviously, sometimes maybe that isn't the case, but I'll not name any names. So she was good at knowing the Bible and teaching the Bible. She was also a missionary in the Middle East, in Jordan specifically, so she had a unique insight to some of those things, which were really helpful with somebody who's been there and seen it, and you're going, "Oh, that makes more sense," about context where I started. She's really good at that. But she's also a medical doctor, so she was a psychiatrist. And teaching this part about Elijah was really interesting, because even when things were going good, it looked like all was right because of all the miraculous signs and wonders. From a medical point of view, she said she would have diagnosed Elijah here with depression and said medically, if you look at all these good things, but yet he just can't see it and all those, what's going on. Like, I'm no medical expert, so I'm not even going to touch on that. But I do know that there are people's mental health, people's mental well-being, that there's lots going on with that. Lots going on in our generation, with our young people, with other people, with everyone. It's something we should be aware of. And thankfully it's being more talked about, definitely in my sphere. But I love how we have a account here of one of the biblical heroes struggling with this. And what surprises, not even surprises me, but encourages, I love how it doesn't end at that point of, yeah, okay, Elijah struggled. God sends an angel, and the word angel just means messenger. So he sends an angel, a messenger, to care for Elijah. He doesn't send him a list that I just read out of all the good things. Elijah, remember this, remember this, remember this, remember this. It wasn't just like, you know what, look at all your blessings, it's been good, get up, what are you doing? It's not what happened. He sent an angel to care, not to give them motivational kick up the backside. Shelter, security under the tree where he sleeps. There was rest. We see care from the angel that comes with food, sustaining again and again. And then after that, God calls him on, and he meets God at Horeb in the cave. And the story, which is another famous one from Elijah, is as he's hiding in the cave, God wants to meet with him, but he doesn't meet with him in the earthquake. He doesn't meet with him in the big wind of the fire, but he meets with Elijah in the gentle whisper. I love it. Does Elijah need a kick up the backside and told to carry on when you're down? When I'm down, do I need that? And some people will be like, oh, but Brent, look at all the good things, look at all this. And we did name those blessings. There's time and place for that. But maybe there's a time and a place also in the midst of all those blessings to feel God's tender care, his gentle whisper. There's a gentle restoring. He wants to meet us at our point of need. It's not to condemn us, to look back at what it should be like. I remember a phrase we came across was what a commentator had said, that a Christian with depression is a bad advertisement for the gospel. And it didn't sit well with me. As we spoke about this, it's like, that is not a bad advertisement for the gospel. That is who the gospel is for. Among everyone else, that is one of the people there. And God wants to come and meet us in that point as well. We need to spot those signs. But we need to meet him. God called Elijah onto that quiet place. So my reflection at this point is, how do you get to Horeb? It doesn't mean you have to travel over the holidays like most people are doing. Well, no, that's not true. There's loads of us here. What do you do to help position yourself to hear from God? It's not dependent on what position you take, but you can't help. We talked about some of these things earlier in the year as we're looking through this. What do you do to position yourself to hear God's gentle whisper? I'm going to ask the guys to come up as we sort of finish off here for the worship team. What do you do? What's your quiet time look like? And for a while, I know when I was going along, quiet times were one of those things you had to do, and then some people said it fell out of fashion of like, oh no, I meet God here, I do this. There's time for just being quiet. However it looks like for you, may not be at 6:30 in the morning in your little office with your Bible open. It may not look like that. I get your life is different to other people's. But where do you put yourself in the quiet place? Do you use things that are helpful? Do you use like John Eldridge's Pause app? Some of the new stuff there is really good about experiencing Jesus. Do you take some of that help and encouragement? Do you use Lectio? I know some of us do. The 365. Do you go for prayer ministry when you feel God nudging you? Where do you position yourself with all the things that go on? My encouragement is, don't be so hard on yourself. There's lots of people who are going to be tough on you. There's lots of people that will tell you don't meet the mark. There's lots of people that will tell you you're not good enough. And yeah, there's plenty of those. But there is a gentle whisper of God meeting you where you are to say, come on. As he said to Elijah, why are you here? Why are you here? That's my question for you to reflect on. Why are you here? How do we put ourselves in a position where we can assist in hearing from him? Because when we meet with him, we can't remain unchanged. We cannot. Our problems cannot remain unaffected when we meet with Jesus. And that's where I want to finish with some of Elijah stuff and how it works for us.
Thanks for listening to the Carrickfergus Vineyard podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our church, please visit our website, carrickfergusvineyard.org.